Hello everyone, I'm Sergey Prokhorenko from Luxoft Agile Practice, and I would like to talk a little bit about corporate organizational changes and Agile adoption. And a few words about me, just a second. About me, about Luxoft, and about where we got this experience and what I would be talking about today. And actually, we're mostly working with large enterprise companies, which are larger than Luxoft, so larger than like tens of thousands of people normally, and there is a very much difference in agile adoption between like small company like 50 or even 1,000 full-time employees and large enterprise one. And I would probably start with top drivers for agile adoption. And through number of years, I've been seeing the mostly the same set of challenges that companies have and which actually push them to think about agile adoption. And those are pretty similar, I guess, to your clients as well. So like paying for the wrong things, like spending budget on features that never uses, like very long time to market for new business initiatives. And that's true for both product development and for internal development companies. And actually very high cost of changes in the product backlog. And last but not the least, very few projects have like visibility from end to end, so what is actually going on in the project. So not in the Gantt charts, not in the status reports, but can we actually use these features, and are they implemented up to required functionality for end users. And as you can see on the right side, in recent study of version 1, like 11's State of Agile report, which was published quite recently, it shows mainly the same set of challenges, mainly the same of reasons for Agile adoption for most of the respondents of this survey. Which tells me that our situation is not unique, and it actually shows mostly representative to the industry. And how come that if we're talking about business so much, if our agile adoptions are focused on the actual business challenges, so how come that in so many times corporate agile adoptions suck so badly? So what happens actually? So why we don't solve actual business problems, and why in many corporations actually agile becomes like a swear word for experts, for middle management, and they say, well, agile is not working for us, we would rather try something else. So my next part would be about common pitfalls. Before we start talking about the shiny stuff like how to make it work, I would like to talk a little bit about common pitfalls and about how we got there. And many companies, especially really large ones, like top 10 investment banks, like large manufacturing companies, they think about agile as a silver bullet, like a universal medicine for everyone, just to solve their problems. And actually, this strip summarizes it all. So it's like agile is some new technique to make IT development work better, work faster, and just to fix every problem without actually changing anything in the company on a high level. And why it happens? So what is different in large enterprises from small companies? Because in small companies, normally decision-making process is pretty simple and pretty short. So that's from CEO down to like regular developer. So it's just a couple of management layers, and actually CEO knows what's going on a project level. And if they even go to some external vendors to outsource part of their development, if they need some external resources, so they still have this like vision of why. So why do they build this product? Why do they need extra resources and so on? And in large corporations, it's not really that. So it's almost always it's also vendor management, which actually tells IT guys that, okay, we understand that you are engaged in some bright IT outsourcing vendor, but we saw this story like a number of times, and we know that vendors cannot be trusted, and we all know that agile is built on trust. So we cannot trust vendors, actually it's their belief. And so that you could do everything you want on the project level, so you could enable all kind of governance that you want to, agile, schmagile, but on a contract level, you need to do the same old tricks, like greater vendor accountability, like shared resource pools, like developers in one location and QAs in other location reporting to different vendors, and ring-fenced change, so that fixed scope, fixed schedule, fixed costs, everything is fixed. And well, actually, that doesn't call for agile very much, isn't it? So, one of my favorite stories, which happened a couple of years ago in a large top 10 investment bank. They started agile transformation in one of their large divisions. So it's large investment bank, it's one of top 10, and they have about maybe 20,000 just IT staff. It's not necessarily their full-time employees, it could be some contractors, it could be some vendor staff, but after all, so it's a like huge pool of resources, as you can call it. Well, agile for them is something like governance model. So how to make all of these bright guys stick to some rules and work together and use the same process models. Doesn't sound very agile-ish, right? Out of this understanding, so they actually projected to the way of implementation of agile transition. So okay, so if it's something that we need for IT, so then we just need IT training, IT teams coaching, and so everything is about IT delivery teams, not about any other department, because we don't need any changes to be done in sales or in account management or in in accounting or some other back office department. So we need problems to be fixed purely in IT. So they don't have enough visibility of the progress on their projects. They show insufficient performance. They have low quality. So there are problems that need to be fixed inside IT. And this is like a good example of what enterprise company actually thinks of agile. So what good Scrum looks like for a typical enterprise. It's not something that I made of just for this talk. So it's actual example from actual agile transformation pilot. And as you can see, so there are words cargo cult mentioned twice. That we are not building this Scrum to get some other cargo cult, and we actually building the right things, just to change the mindset of people, just to make them collaborate, to adopt some values, and so on and so forth. But the overall structure of this agile transition is just dooms this process to be cargo cult, because there is no single mentioning of product development or the top level value of agile transition. So it's all linked to team level. So team members should do this and do that and be accountable for this and that. But it looks like a local optimization, which is always a part of the cargo cult. How they decided to run it. So okay, we cannot run this agile transition for all 1,600 people in this particular department at once. So let's select some pilot projects and do some Scrum over there. sounds reasonable, like with any other initiative in a corporate environment. So okay. Actually, they failed miserably because you could say that this kind of bullshit on top level, that we need some target operating model to be aligned between different vendors, between different departments, between different projects. But when it comes down to actual like project manager or program manager, they all ask very simple question, maybe not to agile coach or to managing director, but to themselves. What's in it for me? So someone at the top, some kind of managing director overseeing 1,600 people, decided that we need Scrum, and gave this nice picture, this nice list to me to understand so what Scrum would be for my program of like 100 people. And well, doesn't look like it solves my actual problems. Well, there was some like reasonable outcome of this agile pilot in this particular bank, and actually some teams that were part of this pilot, they had like quite a lot of value because they really didn't have any good process set up on their level, and in the whole value management chain, so they were the bottleneck. So they were not working up to their business client expectations, and they were not able to deliver something like quite frequently to get proper feedback. And for those guys, it worked. But there was like quite significant amount of other teams which had like completely different topics on their list. Like, for example, they had previously they had team in New York which was working for the bank for a couple of years and which knew product backlog pretty well, and so they were subject matter experts, and they were delivering pretty fast and with decent quality. And now bank decided to cut costs and outsource their jobs to India. And well, the new team doesn't have, so it's cheaper, it's like several times cheaper, but it doesn't have subject matter expertise. They don't know bank systems, they don't know whom to talk, and they actually, well, don't benefit from Scrum transition so much as they would have, because currently the problem is not on the like team like making up Scrum board, like standing up, burning down, and you know. So it's a problem of broken communication chain between product management over there in US and development team in India. It's a matter of them not understanding business priorities. It's a lack of subject matter expertise, and those are not the questions that could be just solved by implementing practices from Scrum Guide. Well, actually, Scrum Guide doesn't offer specific practices. It just says that, well, you have to implement this kind of artifacts and events and roles, and that's it. And how to do that? It's actually up to you. Well, so this pilot was considered like moderate success because for some teams it really worked, but for most teams, no. And actually, like a cherry on top of the cake, this managing director left the company for another bank just after the pilot. So he wasn't actually interested at all in the success of this transition. So hence the lack of leadership and so on and so forth. Another good point is no changes in organizational structure. When well, it's all linked all together. It's the same thing. Like changes are only on IT side. So okay, we're just changing something on development team level, but we leave all the management layers, all the roles, and they don't actually know what to do in the new process. So like we had a transition where it was well, QA QA leader, well, QA manager of QA team. And after we had this transition to cross-functional teams, naturally QA team lead doesn't have much to do, and he didn't understand how he could have his job security in the first place. And he started to make obstacles to team, telling them some things like you can't just write the tests in the middle of sprint and share them with developers because it's against our company procedures. And here is paragraph number 1, 2, 3, which tells that development and QA should be working separately to ensure best possible quality and so on and so forth. So some like silly stuff like that, and that's a problem. And when you run this corporate agile transition, there is a lot of roles which need to be addressed. So you cannot just tell people go away, just think about what you will be doing in a new process or get fired. So it doesn't work like that. So it's it should be thought in beginning of agile transition. And when we work with vendors, so it's also a matter of contracting, because if in the beginning I was talking about like rigid contracting models and fixed price, fixed scope, and if a company continues that practice and doesn't allow IT management and product management to change scope for vendor and to stick to a contract statement of work, so it just doesn't work. There is no way in getting any value out of Scrum. And the last but not the least, well, one of my favorite stories is when clients come to us as consultants and say, we're already doing Agile. So we got some Scrum training, we have these Scrum boards, and we have 2-week iterations, but something is not working right. So we looked at your Agile consulting and training offering, and we decided that there is a professional Scrum product owner training, which would be like just great fit into our model, so that we would like to pay for this training for our people. And that always surprised me, because normally what happens, so when our trainer comes to a company, there is a bunch of people who just like a couple of days before training, out of the blue, got message from HR that you are assigned to get some professional Scrum product owner training, and they don't actually understand how it relates to them. And then when they come to training and we start telling them about things like design thinking, things like product management, like priorities management and so on, they keep telling us, I'm just a business analyst, so I get some tasks out of business stakeholders and I transform them into specifications so that developers know what to do. Well, so and then they provide feedback like, I didn't get any value out of the training. Well, you wasn't supposed to do. Well, I tend to ask our clients this question. So why do you think that this particular service, like this particular training or this particular workshop, so it would impact your process? So why in hell? So you need that. We're going to survival kits, and it actually starts with why. So we failed in agile transitions and facilitating agile changes for our clients quite a few times, and I'm not going to step on this rake like anymore. So every time clients ask us like, get us some training or provide us with some coach who knows scaled agile framework or large-scale Scrum or any other technique. So I always start with why. So why do you think that it would work? So what kind of business challenges do you have? Let's organize some workshop. Let's not call it Agile. So this workshop should be for people who actually create this business value for the company. So it's not only IT guys and not only management, but people from different departments who normally do not collaborate very much in their daily work. To draw some picture, so how they see their organization, to discuss their strengths and weaknesses, to discuss collaboration and build some kind of improvements backlog, so what they think would help their company to overcome this challenge that they have at the plate right now. Well, it works pretty well, surprisingly. And the next point, when we decide that actually company would benefit out of agile, so they're up for agile values and principles, and they're ready to implement new mindset, then we need kind of strategy. And the strategy would be on a like company level or at least department level, so not on the some specific project, but on a higher level, and would involve the whole value chain. And this is just an example, so you could use any kind of wording you like and any kind of form for this roadmap, but it should be transparent for everyone, from the stakeholders of transformation down to every engineer and the development team. So they all need to understand what they're up for and why they are going through this exercise and what's in it for them. And how it would be measured, how it would be benefiting their day-to-day activities, and how we would decide if it's a success or failure, and how we are going to inspect and adapt the workflow of our agile transformation. Well, next point is leadership and executive sponsorship. Actually, I heard, so it's one of the last talks for today, and I heard this stuff being mentioned in our talks yesterday and today from different speakers. And it's actually a pretty common thing. So if you agile coach or agile consultant, trainer, so anyone external to the process cannot be leading the transformation, because as a coach, I only could be, well, kind of consultants at times, facilitators at other times, well, personal coach sometimes, sometimes even mentor to some people or teams, but I cannot be a leader, because I like have no well, I have no power, and I have no well, eligibility to do that, because for those people, so I'm considered as someone external to their process, to their company, and to their values. And what makes a good leader, actually? So first of all, leadership means elaborating vision, like not putting it into some consultant's hands, but actively participating in the process. So as a consultant, so I could facilitate the process. We could create this vision together, but it should be someone or some group of people in the company like accountable for creating this document. So why do we need specific agile transformation? So what's wrong with the company at the moment? So what kind of challenges do we face? And how would agile transformation actually help us? The same with strategy. So what we're going to do, how we would inspect and adapt, and how would we measure it. And the last but not the least is taking accountability for it. And I mean that it shouldn't be like assigning responsibility to someone. So like managing director assigning responsibility to one of their subordinates and telling, so you would be running this agile transition. It should be some actual stakeholder accountable for that and taking courage to actually lead this transformation. And another part is actually executive sponsorship, because at times you would face some obstacles in this transformation, like some organizational changes, some roles being reviewed, some resources being needed, like some budget for some things and all. For that, you would need someone to be like personally attached to actually help you resolve this. And it's not only reviewing progress and providing feedback on how this transformation goes, but it's also helping to eliminate blockers and getting their hands dirty to actually go and like break some Chinese walls and make organization to work more effectively. It all works then and only then when there is a system thinking approach on a level of organization. Because going earlier in the presentation regarding IT stuff, so if we consider this agile transformation as something very specific to IT, so it's not gonna work. So it should be system thinking approach, like applying theory of constraints to find actual roadblocks and actual bottlenecks in the system. And at times it's not always IT. If we don't deliver great products, so in 90% of the time, it's because of long decision-making process in corporation. So it's not because IT guys don't use DevOps methods or because they don't gather feedback every 2 weeks and they don't use any other techniques out of like agile. But it's mostly because people in the other part of the organization making decisions very slowly. And in typical like investment bank, I would say that even if delivery team is working in waterfall environment and they have 3 months release cycles with fixed scope, it's not the biggest problem. The biggest problem is in business stakeholders making decisions for 6-9 months, and this process is completely invisible to IT guys. And when there is a new priority, it comes out of the blue for them. Like, well, you need to drop all the priorities you've been working on and just to start working on something else because this is our new corporate strategy. Well, that's cool, but I would appreciate if you would be able to tell me that like a couple of months ago when it was not a not a strategy yet, but still in a discussion, so that I would prepare at least, and I would be able to find some subject matter experts to talk to them, to prepare myself for new requirements and new features to be built. As I mentioned in the description of my talk, culture is defined by structure. It's one of the Craig Larman's organizational laws. And it means that change actually happens. So it's not that hard. So it's not that culture in the company cannot be changed like at a corporate level. It could be actually, because there was a good talk in a Madrid room by Tobias just before that, and he mentioned great book, Tribal Leadership. And this book is about finding out where organization is currently at which level, and applying very simple coaching and facilitation techniques to change how people talk to each other and how they collaborate to each other. So like making dyads, making triads, like collaborating in pairs, collaborating in larger groups, and using different language to explain like what they feel and what is going on in the larger organization and in their particular group. And for those of you who didn't read this book, I highly recommend it, Tribal Leadership. And it's a set of very concrete, very specific like coaching tips and tricks, which actually work. So I tried that in some organizations and it worked perfectly. So when you start changing how people perceive themselves and how they and the language that they use, So their behavior is starting to change, and behavior then goes to culture and to their values. So that if we are going to change organizational culture and values, so it's not that we should just issue some kind of memo that our new values in the company are like that. But we need to provide a structure where these values are enforced, and when it's like makes sense to work up to these values, and just building a structure which is up to like large-scale Scrum teams and like chief product owners, area product owners, and stuff like that. So it changes people's minds, how they think about what they're doing, and actually their mindset. And well, the last but not the least is continue asking why. So not to stop in the beginning of transformation on the level when we are just defining vision and strategy for this agile transformation, but continue asking, so what am I doing at the moment? How the company would benefit out of that? And is this bullshit or not? So why am I doing that? So why we're going to why we're going to, for example, to use TDD approach? So is it our first priority thing at the moment, or maybe we should focus on something less like less simple for us, for agile coaches, but which would bring much more value for organization, like changing the way business stakeholders collaborate and make decisions, like making them to collaborate not once in a month on a project steering committee, but every week. So it could be harder than to coach developers to use TDD or to set up continuous integration system. But without that, organization wouldn't be going forward in their transition. And this is just one of the examples, and you could actually use this like simple value proposition canvas to identify who are actual customers of this transition, what are their pains, what are their beliefs, and how I would impact by this intervention on what they do. And at this point, I would actually like to thank you for coming and encourage you to ask questions, because we still have like 10 minutes left.
Sergey, thanks for the talk. I also had some experience with transformations and tend to agree to almost everything. Though one first thing really a bit contradicts to what at least I experienced was about pilots. So you mentioned that pilots did not work in that particular case. You tend to consider that they will not work in other cases also, or you just described some particular case?
Well, that's a great question, and I probably missed an important point about piloting agile transformation. So it shouldn't be done when we're first defined vision of the transformation and strategy, and this pilot should serve like in a lean startup, like a method to prove or like fail our hypothesis. So if we're trying to understand if agile methods would solve our problems, so the pilot should be relevant to those problems. And sometimes I see a completely different situation. So pilot is being selected due to some completely internal reasons. Like, for example, these guys already have a cross-functional team, or these guys all work in the same location. So it would be easier for them to pilot Scrum and actually we would see so if it's applicable to our situation. And when pilot ends, we don't have any like extra knowledge out of it, because, well, it worked for this particular case, but it was made up. It was some synthetic example. So that's what I meant by like proving pilots wrong. But if we are using this instrument wisely and actually select unpleasant examples of teams which have some internal problems related to organization, related to their internal collaboration issues, and try to solve them in the scope of pilot rather than going for some like quick wins. So then it would work.
Yeah, thanks. I also like wanted to say that maybe it also would depend from how the expected result is set. So, okay, clear, thanks.
Thank you, Sergey. And question is that have you experienced the successful implementation of Agile and Scrum framework in fixed cost projects?
Yes, I did actually. And Agile allows for fixed cost projects, and if we're talking about not fixed scope. So what I mean by that, so it's, well, if we're talking about to actual business stakeholders of the project, it resonates with them pretty well. So they're pretty pragmatic people normally, and they understand that you cannot fit like twice more requirements into the same cost, into the same resource. And the problem starts when we're having this middleman as like client IT manager, who is actually responsible for outsourcing work to some external vendor. And they don't have courage to go back to the business and say, okay, we are actually ready to adopt some new requirements into the fixed cost projects, but it would mean that we need to reprioritize the backlog and drop something of low significance out of it. Or if we consider the whole project successful and we would have some spare budget in the end, or you would like to add some more budget in the end, so we could also consider these low priority requirements. But it takes courage, and it takes well, low length of this communication chain, because if it's some middleman, some proxy coming to development team and saying clients want it, so I cannot do anything, so then probably they really don't really cannot do anything in fixed cost mode.
Thanks.
Any more questions? If not, in 5 minutes we will have break, coffee break, till 5:30. And please fill in your feedback and leave in the baskets out. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I will be here like available for the rest of the day, so if you would have other questions related to corporate agile adoption, so feel free to find me.